Welcome to Fraudulent Feelings with Fatima podcast, where we dive into real conversations that shape our professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Fatima Nash, and today we're exploring a topic that so many of us wrestle with, yet rarely discuss openly: imposter syndrome. Have you ever felt like you're not good enough, like your success is a result of luck, or that you don't truly deserve your accomplishments? You're not alone. Imposter syndrome impacts high achievers, leaders, professionals at all levels, and even the ones who seem to have it all together. In this episode, we'll break down what imposter syndrome is, how it sneaks into our mindset, and most importantly, how you can push back against it. Together, we'll share insights, stories, and actionable strategies to help you embrace your worth and own your success. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's get into it. Good afternoon, Shannon Page. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm so well. Thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you, audience, for listening. Welcome to Fraudulent Feelings with Fatima. On today's episode of Fraudulent Feelings, we have mental health care advocate, licensed psychotherapist, Shannon Page. Shannon and I have been working together as she is scaling her business, but she's also been supporting me as a first-generation business owner who suffers with imposter syndrome. Welcome, Shannon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Fatima.
Absolutely. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am a licensed psychotherapist, licensed in the states of Virginia, Florida, South Carolina, and Maine. I work with individuals, couples, families, and groups. Trained in a lot of different therapeutic approaches that are extremely helpful to people who suffer from imposter syndrome, anxiety, depression, mood disorders, who struggle with communication, being able to say what they need to say effectively in a way that others can understand. People who want better for themselves and who just do not know a clear path to get there.
Yes. So I have, as I mentioned, I have enjoyed learning more about Fatima through our conversations, specifically about how I can combat my lifelong syndromes of being an imposter, those fake ass feelings. So tell us, from your perspective, what is imposter syndrome anyway?
Well, the clinical definition of imposter syndrome is it is a psychological experience in which a person suffers from feelings of intellectual and or professional fraudulence. It is associated with neuroticism, low self-esteem, perfectionism. It causes higher burnout rates, less satisfaction in life, and lower performance. Um, and it can also be thought to be um, it feels like you're attributing your success to external factors, berating your performance, feels like self-doubt. It feels like sabotaging your own success. Feels like the inability to realistically assess your competence and skills. Fear that you want to live up to expectations. Overachievement feels like setting very challenging goals and feeling disappointed when you don't reach them.
So in that description, did you see my face next to all of that? Because that really sounds like you're talking about me. But I
I
would
saw
imagine
your head. Yes.
that there's a lot of us, right? Us high
Um,
achievers, us
yes.
type A personalities,
Yes.
us women, men too, for sure,
Yes.
that suffer with these fraud feelings. How do you think, I mean, I know how they've limited me, but from your clinical perspective, how can these fake fraud feelings prohibit one's overall happiness?
Well, They limit your overall happiness because you always feel like there is something else that you need to achieve in order to feel like you are.
Mhm.
So you're never satisfied with anything that happens. You minimize your successes as if they're attributed to luck or they're
Mhm.
no big deal. Um, you don't feel comfortable when people acknowledge the things that you've done.
Mhm.
And that can really bring on sometimes an imposter syndrome attack. When
Mhm.
people are saying that you did a great job or you did this, then you think about all the things that you feel like you misstepped, all the places you misstepped. If you weren't 100% perfect, then you feel like you were not good
Yeah, that's
enough.
me in a nutshell. And how that how I react to that is super off-putting to people that are giving me compliments because when someone gives me a compliment, the first thing I do is roll my eyes because there's no way on God's green earth that they are actually believing that I did a good job because I know for a fact that I did not because I missed this comma, I had a typo, the color scheme on the PowerPoint deck that I had to create was not accurate. I misspoke. My buttons are on wrong. Like there's a list of things. My hair ain't right. Like all those things. And so I have years and years and years of apologizing to do to many, many, many people in my life because I often don't accept positive feedback. Um, and that to me is a symptom of having imposter syndrome too, right?
Yes, it definitely is. And if we take it all the way back to when you're with children, people with imposter syndrome usually grow up in families where there are higher levels of conflict and lower levels of support. You live with controlling parents or parents who are inconsistent with their praise, with their acknowledgement of you, with their attention, or if you lived in a family where academic success was overemphasized, all of those things can make you feel like you were not good enough.
Right. Yeah.
I remember in first grade bringing home my report card and I got all A's and I got one C. My father said nothing about all of my A's. He looked at me and said, "Let's talk about this C." And it crushed me
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, "Did you not see all the other stuff?" First grade, you're 6 years old,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I never wanted to have that conversation with my father again,
Ever again. Right.
ever again.
Right.
So I made sure I was on top of my stuff all the time from then on,
Mm-hmm.
like going over and above
Mm-hmm.
just to feel like I was good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Because I
So
didn't want to have that conversation.
you didn't want to have those feelings, right? You didn't want
No.
to have, especially from someone that you respect so much, like, a parent. So there are two thoughts come to mind. One, you started talking about school, so it took me back. Oh my God. So I have always been really awful at math, like super duperly awful, hands sweating, like sick to my stomach, like ever since I was probably in the first grade. Um, I lived in Alaska from the second grade to the sixth grade. And living on a military base and living in Alaska, there were not a lot of people that looked like me and you. And my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Johnson, she looked like us. And so my respect for her was magnetized by like a trillion. And I just thought that, wow, she's so smart. She dresses so nice. She was fly. Even in snow boots, she was fly.
Hmm.
And we would have this math, the way she structured her math lesson. If you did not understand the homework, you would have to have do-overs. And do-overs was in front of the entire class at the whiteboard.
Mm.
So imagine me, 45-year-old Fatima. So imagine, I don't know, fifth grade, what are you, 10? So 10-year-old Fatima, terrified, extreme social anxiety. I also really, really suck at math. And all of my papers were do-overs because I always got my homework incorrect. And she would berate me at the front of that classroom in front of all of my peers. So to this day, I have extreme imposter syndrome when it comes to numbers and second guess and have to double, triple check because of that constant imprint that was made on me at 10 years old in childhood that has carried me all these years. I am still very terrified. I have the smartest, you met my boys. I have the smartest young men. And they got to call somebody else about that math homework. Like, because listen, when my son, the oldest pre-med, was in the seventh grade, he was taking, I don't know, geometry or something. I couldn't help that boy with his homework. Like, you have to wait till your engineer dad comes home because I am feeling very, very imposter. Like, I don't have the skills to be your mom right now because I'm sitting up here not even understanding how to help you with your homework. I'm sweating like it's me and Miss Johnson in the front of the classroom all over again. So I say all that to say, y'all, imposter syndrome sometimes shows up where you least expect it, but also has nothing to do with business sometimes. It has everything to do with how you show up in your life, period. And in that case, as a mom. So yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you know what's interesting? Im Imposter syndrome is always, well, it's usually related to fear or anxiety.
Mhm.
So if we think of in the therapy world, we think of ourselves as different parts. And so if you think of the imposter as just a part of yourself, it's the part of you that thinks that it needs to have all of the answers, right? But nobody has all the answers. And if you think you have all the answers, it's because you haven't been asked the right questions. Because eventually somebody will ask you something that you don't know. And if you have built your life or who you are on having all the answers, it's going to completely destroy you, right? So the imposter part, it's a part thinks she needs to have all the answers. We don't have problems until we spend more time listening to it, believing that that is what is actually true. That's when we fall apart.
So, aha moment for everyone, including myself. When you think of, oh man, did you just give me a math equation? Holy crap. Okay. So you just said imposter syndrome happens in a math equation when you're thinking more about those fraud feelings than your actual true feelings. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I think that's a math equation I can solve. So as long as I'm saying self, you've heard that part of yourself enough, limit that and focus on the positive, I can overcome imposter syndrome that easily, or what else? What am I missing?
So that's part of it.
Okay.
The part that you're missing is you have to understand, you have to spend some time with the imposter to understand why it is. Once you spend some time with the part, it'll tell you why it's there. You
Mm.
have to validate those feelings, um, remind it of all the things that you've done that have been successful.
Okay. Okay.
But the biggest part of it is acknowledging, validating, thanking it even for being a part because it exists because it's trying to keep you safe, it's trying to keep you out of the spotlight, it's trying to keep you in this little box
Mm-hmm.
because that's we're okay here.
Mm-hmm.
If we start living large, if we start showing people exactly how great we are, and people are going to be looking at us and people are going to be watching us and people are going to have stuff to say, and then you have to deal with all the stuff that comes after it. Bring it on.
Oh. That is so true because I've been told my whole life that I should be doing more. Um, I should be doing more outreach. I should be in front of people more. I should publish. I should do all these things. And it wasn't until last year that I actually pulled my head out of my ass and executed on some of those things because I had this big old block of imposter feelings that I could not get through. So thanks to you though, shout out to Shannon Page, has helped me unblock a shit ton of fake ass feelings. So thank you for that. When
Of
we
course.
think about, for me, and I'm going to go a little bit deep. And it's a very, very active political season, as you know. There's been a lot of changes recently to some very, very, very historical and tenured policies. And to
Mhm.
me, imposter syndrome shows up for me in the workplace because I'm so nervous that folks think that I'm there because of a DEI policy versus because of my own value and contributions. And so I feel like being a Black woman in America and working in corporate America has also fed my imposter fake feelings because in the field and the space that I am in, there are not a lot of people that look like us. And so not only do I feel like in my corporate world, I don't know how to navigate because I'm a first generation corporate person. I was a first generation high school, first generation college, first generation homeowner, first generation, a lot of things. And so I feel like because I didn't have the family legacy examples, that I don't know how to show up. But then you overlay that with not being able to identify with people that look like me in my place of employment, and not at my current place, but all the places. Then layer on top of that the DEI part. So I feel like, yes, I'm still the little Fatima that's 10 years old having imposter syndrome in Miss Johnson's class, but I'm also the big Fatima too that have been in places that had made me feel insecure and awkward that has also fed to my imposter syndrome.
Yes, it's true. And when imposter syndrome was first coined, well, it disproportionately affects women of color. And when they first started talking about imposter syndrome in the 70s or 60s or whatever, they were talking about how at, at first they believed that mostly women were the ones who suffer from it. But now they realize it affects men and women. Um, in fact, they say now that about 70% of all people experience at least one episode of imposter syndrome in their lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for women of color, of course, it's going to be way more often than that.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is because of the way the country has been structured, with business has been structured. And so diversity, equity, and inclusion programs existed because the overarching experience was that everything being one way, homo- homogeneity
Mm-hmm.
in the workplace doesn't help. It doesn't help because everybody thinks the same. Your
Mm-hmm.
experiences have been similar,
Mm-hmm.
and you miss so much stuff when you're only focused on when it's the boys club
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. You miss all the stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I agree.
and and so the feelings of being a fraud happen because even though you're allowed to be inserted in those spaces, there was not room for you in those spaces. And so that's the same thing that happened with integration when little black girls and boys first went to school in the South, you let them in. You didn't put any supportive services in place. You didn't make sure they felt safe. You didn't make sure that there was nothing available to them to support them, to make sure that they were successful. The experience is that you just expect that they'll get it, and they have to come and function in this system that's not going to change. It's not going to help. We're just going to let you play, but we're not going to give you any of the things that you need to play. And so imposter syndrome shows up because that is the experience.
100%. I couldn't
But
agree more.
what's so funny is there's a difference between equality and equity, right? So um there was a meme that I saw. It was like it had three people trying to watch like a sporting event or whatever. And there was a fence. And so the taller person, of course, can see over the fence, right? And then the other two people, because there isn't anything there, they can't see,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But you think you did something because you let them come to the thing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's equal when the tall person can see over the fence and give the other two people a step or something that they can stand on so that they can also see over the fence. And
100%.
that is something that our country has not grasped, and they haven't grasped it because they don't want to grasp it, you know. And so those things happen over and over again. And
Agree.
so you have to find yourself opportunities to feel safe. You have to be in a position that makes you safe. And if it means that you need to separate yourself so
Mm-hmm.
that you can be around people who understand your experience, um, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so what?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the flow of ideas that comes when you are safe is so much better when you are forced to operate in a space that didn't want you there in the first place.
Preach it, sister. Preach it. Agreed. Oh my God, yes.
And the
And
thing that this is the thing that I think scares them the most. When we are on our own, we will excel,
yes, we will.
over excel.
I think 70% of
We
us have master's degrees or something crazy.
we outshine all the time with very little effort.
Mhm. Mhm. You're
So
exactly
now
right.
you
You're
want to
exactly
get rid of all the programs. Okay, so let's see what that does for you. Let's see what you can do on your own.
absolutely.
Let's see.
Absolutely. It's interesting. There's so many thoughts, and I wrote down some, and my head is pinging all over the place. I love this dialogue so much. What really rose to the top when you spoke is okay, the country is moving away from diversity and inclusion. So if I'm shorter than my competition, going back to the meme analogy, and I can still see over the fence without the DEI support, then the imposter syndrome goes out the window
Correct.
because there's nothing anchoring it because I didn't have a leg up. I didn't have a program. I walked in there, showed you what I was worth, killed it, and went about my business. So, those listeners out there that meet this demographic, please know and understand that even though you could be employed by an organization that has strong DEI principles, it's likely your own effort that got you to where you are and got you to excel and exceed. And if you are in an environment that cannot see that, and I know coins are tough, especially post COVID, I get it, but you got to get out and get you to a place that's safe so that you can feel more comfortable. because imposter syndrome can be a death sentence. At least it has been for me, where it stopped my pockets, it made me fat, it made me sick to my stomach at times. And
Mm.
so it's a disease, guys. And everyone has got to recognize that imposter syndrome is like a dead weight holding you down and stopping you from being great.
Yes. And the another huge contributing factor to imposter syndrome is social media. We
Hmm.
live in a time where everybody is comparing their race or their progress to everybody else's.
Hmm.
And all you see on social media is like people's highlight reel.
Hmm.
You don't see
The
the
real,
times when you don't see the real
right?
experience.
That's
You
right.
see the parts that they want you to see.
Right.
You have no idea what they were doing behind the scenes. You have no idea how much smoke and mirrors is involved in what
You don't know how much junk is over here behind this monitor right now.
you. Correct.
So I can't see. Right.
It's just crazy,
Yeah.
you know? And your timeline is your timeline. Just because you haven't made it yet doesn't mean you never get there.
Mhm.
You just have to stay the course. You have to remember who you are, what you've done,
Mhm.
and even if a program got you in the door, your efforts are what made you stay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's what you have to tell that voice that
Yes.
tries to tell you you're a fraud.
Yeah.
No, I'm not a fraud.
Yeah. Yeah.
I should have been here.
Yeah. Long
They
time
just
ago.
wouldn't let me play.
Right. That's right. So one of the things that I have, and we've talked about this off camera, one of the things that I feel like combats imposter syndrome and combats the challenges of the workplace is being an entrepreneur. But it takes you really, really, really using that math equation and not giving the imposter voice so much attention in order to go out on your own. And you've been an entrepreneur, first generation entrepreneur for decades. So tell me, what's your secret? How have you beat your own imposter syndrome? How have you built this empire where you are able to service so many individuals? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Um, I think being able to combat imposter syndrome successfully comes from a place of authenticity. I don't have to do everything better than anybody else. My only competition is myself.
Mhm.
And so I try to be better than I was the day before.
Mhm.
I try to take a realistic look at myself
Mhm.
about the things that I can do, the things that I need to improve upon. When
Mhm.
I'm not giving my best effort, when I know I need to be doing more or I can do more, I set realistic expectations for
Mhm.
myself. You know,
Mhm.
those are the ways that I do it. Do
Right.
I get it right 100% of the time? Absolutely not. But I'm not going to crumble and fall to pieces when I make a mistake or
Right.
when I mess up.
Right.
I'm going to look at what happened. I'm going to figure out what I can do differently the next time,
Mhm.
and I'm going to keep it moving
Mhm.
because everything outside of you that doesn't want you to succeed hopes that you're going to stay down. And I just refuse to let those factions win.
Yes. I
You
love
just
that.
can't.
I love that. What did T.I. say? TIP versus TI or something like that, like the versus me type of mentality. Like,
Yes, that's exactly it.
you know, I, you know, my family very well, and you know that my son has heavy dreams. It's a two-parter. One, he wants to make it to play on Sundays
Hmm.
in NFL, and he wants to study pre-med. And so those are his goals.
Hmm.
The amount of effort with someone with that much ambition has to use to quiet down the imposter feelings um, is tough for a 19-year-old. And we've had great discussions over the Christmas break, um, about him versus him. Because
Hmm.
at the end of the day, that's all it is.
Yeah.
It really, truly is in its simplest form. What I've learned, I haven't beat imposter syndrome, but I'm working on it. I'm healing. Um, it is Fatima versus Fatima. No one else comes to play. And when you really focus on that and truly be selfish, truly put your mask on first, truly practice self-care, those voices, the outside voices won't even matter. It'll be Fatima versus Fatima. And
Yeah.
the good positivity Fatima will win 100%. I
Yeah.
have won. I've had that demonstrated. I know that that can happen. I built the muscle memory for that to happen. I use my tools. I go back and look at and smell my roses. I build my block scheduling, right? Like you and I
Yeah.
talk about that all the
Yeah.
time. Like this is the
Yeah.
time I'm going to be focused on this so
Yeah.
that I can prove to myself that I can do it and I can be
Hmm.
successful.
Hmm.
So, Shannon, where can people find you to connect with you, hang out with you?
Well, my website is www.focusbehavioralinterventionsllc.com.
Okay.
Um, my email address is focusbehavioralinterventions@gmail.com. They want to reach out to me by email. I'm on LinkedIn, Shannon Page. Um, you can find me any of those places.
Awesome. Well, I will link your socials and your contact information to this episode. I am really, really looking forward to all that we will do together in 25. Your
Too.
passion for therapy and kind of saving the world, and my passion for operationalizing how to help people like you save the world. Um, what's on the books for us and our roadmap is incredible. And I'm so excited. I'm so
I
excited.
am too.
I
I am
really
too.
am. I'm very
Yep.
grateful for the time that we spend together every single week, whether you're helping me with my imposter syndrome or I'm helping you develop your business and kind of giving you permission to do you and scale. Because all the things that I'm actually helping you with, you already know and already do well. I'm just enhancing that a little bit. And so, us joining together in 25 and taking this show on the road, will be able to touch and help so many people in such a positive way. So, I thank you for joining
Thank
today's
you.
episode of
Thank you.
Fraudulent Feelings. And I look forward to you coming back on the show in the future.
Me too. Thank you so much. I really
Thank you.
enjoyed myself today.
Yes, thank you. All right, guys, you heard it here. Fraudulent Feelings with Shannon Page, a licensed psychotherapist who helps folks like me, first generation business owners, beat down that imposter syndrome. Thanks for listening. Until next time, see you later.
Yes. And the